11. The end fronds of the broad cephalus leaves that formed the roofs of the Tatate homes reflected the soft starlight filtering through the treetops. No sign of life moved over the beaten ground between the log buildings, for the entire tribe was gathered in the long nesting house, as they did whenever a momentous decision was required. Apart from the birthing season, the place was usually empty except for meetings of this kind. The central council sat in a circle, with Hetman Totito and Dokepe, the shaman and spiritual leader of the tribe, in the center. There were only 11 members of the council. One space was left vacant for the missing member. The long interior of the house was filled with the sounds of soft muttering as the tribe settled down to what would be a lengthy meeting. Whenever a Tatate tribe faced an important decision, all the members gathered to hear the discussion. The subject would be announced by the hetman, or leader of the tribe, and then each member of the council would have a chance to speak in turn. The order of the speakers was ordained by a tradition that extended back as far as any living member could remember. The newest member of the council spoke first, for he would also be the youngest member. The 12 Tatate represented the 12 oldest members of the tribe, be they male or female, and when there was a vacancy, the oldest member not of the council automatically filled that space. That was the situation now, and the tribe waited for the hetman to announce the vacancy. Vacancies occurred only on the death of a member of the council. Under normal circumstances, that death would have been witnessed by the entire tribe. When a Tatate felt the cold fingers of his own passing, he would announce it to the tribe. They would then take him to the nesting house, where he would be comforted by the tribe. The dying member would accept water but no food until he quietly passed away. Then they would carry his remains to a special place, where the individual was buried among flowers, herbs, and some items of his or her own making. Because there was little private property among the Tatate, the graves did not contain much. There the body would rest for eternity. The Tatate's religious system was a loose one. They knew or felt the existence of a power greater than themselves, and they were sure that it resembled their own form. But they weren't quite sure of its might or how it would deal with the Tatate after death. They believed in an existence after death, but seemed mostly uninterested in the details. Life would be an extension of the present, and that was good enough. They also had a concept that doing good while in this existence was a requirement for the good life beyond, which made it important for a Tatate to serve the tribe in some way. Sitting on the council was considered a good thing, especially if the member conducted himself with the dignity deserving of the office. Now the tribe gathered in the nesting house, the most important building in the tribal compound, to hear what the advisors would say. This meeting was all the more important because one of the council members was missing. The fact that the member had departed without the traditional notification was unusual. Such an event had not occurred within the memory of any but the oldest of the council. With the average Tatate life expectancy something like 200 years, that was a long memory. But even the oldest members could not recall a time when any member of the council had died without the benefit of a proper burial. As the last of the tribe settled into their assigned places, Totito rose from his position in the center of the circle and began to speak. He looked around the entire circle of elders, his eyes passing over the vacant places. "Counselor Dakoro," he said in a firm voice, "please answer the call of the council." He waited for a moment and then made the call again. He repeated the call 12 times, as was the tradition of the tribe. 12 was an important number in the life of the Tatate, for it had roots in their religion, the birth process, the government, and their own physical structure. There was no response from their missing member, nor had anyone in the room expected there to be. Everyone knew that Dakota had vanished into the tribe of humans. It was also known that the humans had taken a young Tatate who would never return. It was a time of some confusion for the members. 12 times Totito scanned the circle of elders. 12 times he called for Dakota to take his place within the circle. Then he made the announcement. The missing member of the tribe makes no response, and so we shall consign Dakota to the past. Let the present continue. I will take the place of my missing brother, came a voice from among the assembly. May I serve as well as the missing Dakota, as he served in the place of Teka, as she served in the place of Tatati, as he served. The tradition of the place on the council was defined by those who had held it, and the newest member of the council repeated the names of all those who had gone before. The list was more than 20 names long, and the other members of the council waited until the recitation had finished. Then, each in turn greeted the newest member, who remained standing outside the circle. They uttered the ritual words, Welcome, Pope, who will serve in the place of the missing Dakota, who served for Teka, who served for Tatati, who served. The list continued through the full response. Each member of the council gave the acceptance reply. Thus were the traditions of the Tatate kept alive. They had no written language, so their culture and knowledge were passed down orally. This transmission, which started when young at birth and continued until death claimed them, was a time-consuming process, but it meant that Tatate did not enjoy the luxury of forgetting. When a society can write down its past, its people have the option of forgetting their own history. Once it is written, it is assumed to be saved. And if it is already saved, what reason is there for each member of the community to remember it? With Pope accepted into the circle of elders, the council was able to begin discussing the situation. Totito announced the question before the meeting, as was his duty. The position of hetman within the tribe was separate from that of council member. The hetman was the administrative leader of the tribe, but he acted more as a moderator than an advisor. It was his duty to ask the question and later to enunciate the answer, but he had no say in the decision itself. His position was filled upon vacancy by the member of the tribe best qualified to perform the mundane, day-to-day functions of administrator. That member must be accepted by all, and the one who would become the new hetman was named a successor long before the event became necessary. In some cases, the position was hereditary, but that was not a law. Totito had succeeded to the place of hetman upon the death of his grandfather, stepping past his father, who did not even hold a position on the council. This question was much more complex than the ones they usually occupied council discussions with. A traditional meeting often had to do with matters of sending an envoy to another tribe, or the opening of a new field, or the necessity of moving the tribe to a new location, or, occasionally, the need to break the tribe into two bands. The division of the tribe was, of course, a grave decision. The Tatate made very little use of domesticated plants and none of animals, living mostly by harvesting the area's natural abundance. When the tribe became too large for the surrounding area to support, it was time to divide the group in two. Such an event only took place perhaps once every 300 years. However, because the tribe's population growth was so slow, it was a momentous event, requiring the most serious discussion. The question now facing the tribe was at least equal, and possibly even more significant than the division of the tribe. For many of those gathered in the nesting house, the question involved the tribe's very survival. What Totito had asked should be the response of the tribe to the presence of the newly arrived humans, especially since they came so long after the others who had arrived in the time of legend. Having asked the question, he sat and awaited the council's response. The other Tatate shifted their positions and waited. It would be a long discussion. Pope, as the youngest and newest of the council of elders, spoke first. She began with a long history of the Tatate from before the arrival of the other humans, explaining in detail how the plains dwellers had become two different tribes. She dwelt on the growth of the two groups. She told how the plains dwellers had continued to move several times each year, how they were able to survive, but that they did not progress. She explained that they were the victims of nature, but how, through them, the religion of the Tatate was fostered. She then went on to speak of the long traditions of the forest dwellers, how they had become able to develop a different way of life, how the log huts had come into being, how life had become better. Then she began the long saga of the humans and their dealings with the Tatate. Although there was little good to say about the humans, she stressed that their association had been with the plains dwellers. She understood that many Tatate had been killed by the humans, but that eventually the humans had come to understand that the Tatate were able to speak. The plains dwellers had learned the language of the humans and communicated that they were not hostile. The attitude of the humans changed. They had stopped trying to destroy the Tatate once they discovered that the Tatate could speak and think. Now they exploited them for other purposes. The relationship with the humans had not been a good one for the Tatate. When Pope finished, she sat down. The next most junior member of the council, Cato, stood and began his speech. He covered the same ground as the first speaker, relating the information almost verbatim. That was the tradition of council discussions. But this speaker took the story into greater detail. He said that the humans were a threat to the Tatate and should be dealt with at once. He advocated, if only gently, that the Tatate should consider violence. That was a subject and an attitude that was far from the nature of the tribal council, and there were ripples of comment in the darkness beyond the circle. He continued, becoming more and more strident as he spoke. The expressions of emotion were quite rare for a Tatate, and the listeners began to shift uneasily in their places. Pope ended his dissertation with what amounted to a call to arms. There is a time to shun the enemy. There is a time to flee the enemy. Now is the time to... He sat down. There was a long pause before the next speaker. Cato was young, at least in comparison to the other members of the council. He represented a new concept among the tribe, and it was a popular one. He stood for an active rather than a passive attitude, and his position was gaining ground. The other speakers were more cautious. They were not willing to fight the humans, especially with the example of what could happen when they did. They had no weapons. They had no organization. The speakers recalled the response of the tribes to other dangerous situations. In those cases, the affected ones had always chosen to either shun the intruder, or to move, or both. In all cases, the tribe had survived. It was the correct response. The sun was high in the sky by the time the last counselor had spoken. The urgency of the situation had shortened many of the speeches. Whereas a discussion to send envoys could occupy a week, this one had taken less than 18 hours. When the last member of the tribe of elders had retaken his seat, Totito rose to his feet. The elders have spoken, he said. The tribe will shun the intruders and prepare to move away. We will watch them carefully, but we will not contact them again. We will have nothing more to do with them.